We are on to week 4 of the NFL season, and last week I did not do well with my picks at all. I went 7 and 9, which that is the worst week that I've had in a while. And I'll be honest, this is the second straight week where the picks haven't gone well, and I'm honestly a little bit frustrated by it. I used to not be bothered by not having a good week and just moving on to the next one, but ever since this channel has gotten to where it's gotten, it has bothered me a bit because I just feel like I'm letting people down with having a bad week. I'm hoping that I can have a massive response this week. I'm hoping I can get at least 10 correct picks this week with the way things have been going the last couple of weeks, and I think I'm only at 26 and 22 on the year so far if I did the math right. But for some reason, this season so far has been the most unpredictable season that I can remember. But I really want to get into these week 4 picks as I am looking to have a response to these abysmal past 2 weeks. Without further ado, let's get to the week 4 NFL predictions. As always, we begin with Thursday night football, and this week we have the Cowboys and Giants. The Cowboys have lost 2 in a row, losing to the Saints and Ravens at home, and now they go on the road to take on the Giants, a Giants team with some confidence after an upset victory last week over the Browns on the road. This may just be my opinion. I know it's only week 4, but I feel like this is a must win for the Cowboys. I feel like the Cowboys season is already on the line at this point in the year. They've lost back to back weeks. They take on a Giants team that has some confidence going. And looking at their next 6 games after this week, on the road against the Steelers are 3-0 right now. They are playing phenomenal defensively. The Lions at home, the 49ers on the road, which we'll see how many of their playmakers are going to return for that game. On the road against the Falcons, the Eagles at home, and the Texans at home. I feel like if they don't win this game, I feel like they're going to lose a bunch of confidence. And despite the Giants having some confidence right now, I think this is a get right game for the Cowboys. I think they realize their backs are against the wall at this point in the season. And I do think it's a get right game for the Cowboys, and they win by at least 2 touchdowns. Saints and Falcons, an NFC South showdown. And I do not know which side to lean towards in this matchup. Both teams are looking to respond after being on the losing end last week. The Saints, they have done well offensively in the first 2 games of the season, but last week it was a struggle to put points on the board. But their defense, they did hold their own. They did stop the Eagles on multiple fourth down plays. While the Falcons, they held their own against the Chiefs. And it was a game where I feel like the Falcons, they could have won, but pass interference was not called against the Chiefs, as it was clearly pass interference in the end zone, which that could have really changed the momentum in that game if the Falcons would have gotten a touchdown on that drive. And the Saints, they had a hard time stopping Saquon Barkley last week. If the Falcons were to win this game, it would be because of a big game from Bijan Robinson. And if the Saints win this game, I feel like it would be a game where maybe the Falcons, they just don't know how to move forward after losing the way they did, as they gave it their all for all 60 minutes against the 2-time defending Super Bowl champions. But I'm going to lean towards who I feel like is going to run the football more efficiently in this game. And I do feel like that's going to be the Saints. As the Falcons, they do have some injury concerns on the offensive line. I'm going to go with the Saints to win an absolute slugfest. I feel like this could be your 23-20 game of the week, as I feel like both teams, they have the potential of doing well defensively throughout the season. But for the Falcons offense especially, I'm wanting to see them take that next big leap with Kirk Cousins under center. Bengals and Panthers. The Bengals, a loss to the Commanders on Monday Night Football to fall to 0-3 on the year. And the Panthers got their first win of the season in a dominant win over the Raiders, where Andy Dalton had a phenomenal performance, and he will once again be the quarterback for the Panthers in this game. And Andy Dalton, he needs to be the starting quarterback for the Panthers until further notice. But I do think that this is a good thing for Bryce Young to learn behind a veteran quarterback in Andy Dalton, as we have seen quarterbacks in the past that once they were able to learn from a veteran quarterback when it was their time to shine, they did. And I feel like that could be the case for Bryce Young. I'm not giving up on Bryce Young yet, but I do feel like this is a must-win for the Bengals. I do feel like the Bengals, they can still rally, make the playoffs, even though they're 0-3. But if they fall to 0-4, I don't think that's the case anymore. So this is a must-win for them, just like the Cowboys this week, as I mentioned earlier, as the Bengals' backs are against the wall. And I do think with the pressure on this Bengals team, I do think they do get the win over the Panthers. But I do think it's possible Andy Dalton is in line for another phenomenal game, but I don't think this time around it will be enough, as they are competing against a desperate Bengals team that we've seen in years past start off slow, but then they start to rally. And just like the Cowboys against the Giants, I think this is a get-right game for the Bengals. Rams and Bears. The Rams, off of a very emotional victory over the 49ers. A shorthanded Rams team defeated a shorthanded 49ers team, as the 49ers, they were ahead very late in the game. It looked like they had the game won, but the Rams rallied back and took it from them at the last minute. And now they go on the road to the Windy City to take on Caleb Williams and the Bears. And Caleb Williams last week, he did throw his first 2 touchdown passes of his career. He also threw 363 passing yards, but he did throw 2 interceptions, which were very costly when you look at the final scoreboard in that game. A 21-16 loss to the Colts. And if the Rams are going to rally and pull off another upset, despite being shorthanded, it will be off of Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams, he had a big performance against the 49ers last week. 89 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. As the Bears defense, even though the Bears defense, they have played really well so far this season, being a difference maker against the Titans in week 1, holding their own against the Texans in week 2, and doing everything they could this past week, but they gave up 110 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns to Jonathan Taylor last week. But the offense, they just couldn't generate enough points. But I do think this week the Bears defense does hold their own. And I do think the offense does produce enough points to win this game. And as I mentioned last week, Caleb Williams didn't play well in his first 2 games, but then I said in the next few games, we'll see Caleb Williams start to take that next big leap, as I have already seen people jump to conclusions on Caleb Williams being a bust. But I never underestimated him. I knew that it would take him at least 4 or 5 games for him to get into the flow of the NFL. And I think the Bears, they win this week off of a strong performance from Caleb Williams. Vikings, Packers. Will the Vikings pull off an upset for the third consecutive week? Will Jordan Love return for the Packers this week after he sustained an MCL sprain in week 1 against the Eagles in Brazil? He's missed the last couple of games, but Malik Willis, he has gotten the job done as the backup quarterback for the Packers in these past couple of weeks. The Packers defense has also stepped up to the occasion these past 2 weeks as well. And both of these defenses, they have shown lots of improvement from last season. The Vikings, they gave the 49ers and the Texans fits with Brian Flores' schemes in back-to-back weeks. While the Packers defense, they've been forcing turnovers. 3 interceptions against Anthony Richardson and 2 interceptions against Will Levis last week. And I think that this matchup, it does come down to which defense is going to force those turnovers, which defense is going to be better in this game. I do feel, regardless if Jordan Love plays or not in this game, I do think the Vikings win this game. I feel like it's hard to pick against the Vikings right now with what they've done in the last couple of weeks. But I am just worried that if I pick the Vikings, and the Vikings will just lose, because this was one of those games this week I was unsure about, mainly because we don't know if Jordan Love will play or not. But I think it's in the Packers' best interest that Jordan Love doesn't play this week, at least in my opinion. I feel like if the Packers were 1-2 instead of 2-1, then maybe they would try to have him play. But I think maybe sit him out at least one more week, because this is a absolute ferocious Vikings defense as they made dramatic improvements in the offseason. And I'm going to pick the Vikings to win and pull off another upset, as right now the Packers are favored by 2.5 points. Jaguars and Texans. The Jaguars looking for their first win of the year, going up against the Texans, looking to respond after their first loss of the season. An abysmal performance it was against the Vikings. And things just keep going from bad to worse for the Jaguars. Their latest loss, a 47-10 loss against the Bills on Monday Night Football. And I am starting to think that Doug Peterson is going to be on his way out with the Jaguars. I will be surprised if he does finish out the season with the way things are going at this point in time. And I really feel like Doug Peterson is just another Mike McCarthy. Someone who was fortunate enough to win one Super Bowl and has done nothing else in his coaching career. That's how I'm viewing Doug Peterson at this point with the way things are going. And it may still be the case when it's all said and done. And I have all the confidence in the world in the Texans to get this one done, as the Jaguars, they just don't have any confidence at all right now. We'll see if Joe Mixon does play in this game, as Joe Mixon, he did not play in the game last week. Cam Akers was the starting running back for the Texans. But the way the Jaguars have been on both sides of the ball so far this season, at least in week 1, they were in it, but their offense just ruined it by going for it on 4th and 1 from their own side of the field, which ruined all the momentum they had. And I think that's basically been the story of their season, is just that moment right there. I think the Jaguars, they fall to 0-4. I'm picking the Texans to bounce back after last week's defeat to the Vikings. Steelers and Colts. The Steelers are 3-0, and a big reason for that has been their defense. Their defense has yet to allow more than 10 points in a game this season. But will that change this week against the Colts? Justin Fields, he hasn't put up the most exciting numbers, but he has done enough to get the job done each and every single week, which you can admire stats all you want. You can admire and appreciate stats, but the only thing that matters is the win-loss column, and the Steelers are 3-0. Najee Harris is questionable for this game. It's unknown if Jaylen Warren will be playing in this game as well. But I think as long as the Steelers defense, they continue to hold their own, I do think they win this game, and I am picking the Steelers to win this game. However, this is one of those games this week, just like Saints and Falcons, where it just feels like a coin flip. The Steelers' run defense did really well against a run-first Chargers team last week. And Jonathan Taylor did well last week. He's done well in these first couple weeks of the season. But they're taking on a ferocious Steelers run defense. And Anthony Richardson, he's already thrown 6 interceptions this season. And those turnovers, they have been really costly for the Colts. But I'm going to go with the Steelers to win this game, as I do think that this ideally could be another low-scoring game. That's the type of game the Steelers need. But if this game turns into a track meet, then I do think the Colts have the edge. But I am going to go with that Steelers defense to come through for one more week. Broncos and Jets. The Broncos got their first win of the year last week in a 26-7 victory over the Buccaneers. And Bo Nix, he played really well. 25 for 36, 216 passing yards. He didn't throw a touchdown pass, but he did have a rushing touchdown on 9 carries and 47 yards. And also, the big thing, no interceptions. I had talked about last week I wanted to see Bo Nix and Will Levis play cleaner football and not turn the ball over so much. Bo Nix, he accomplished that task successfully. Will Levis, not so much. But if the Broncos are going to pull off another upset, they're taking on a Jets team that is off of a Thursday night game and a win, so they have the extra rest factor to their side. If Bo Nix can play clean football once again, I think the Broncos have a chance of pulling off another upset. However, you know where I like to go with teams that played on Thursday night the week before. About 95% of the time, I will lean towards the team that played on Thursday night, and this is another one of those cases. I do think both defenses are going to hold their own in this game. I actually do think this game will be low scoring. I think this has the potential of being your 20-14 game of the week, and I'm going to pick the Jets to win this one. And right now, the Jets are a 7-point favorite, so I think there is a strong possibility the Broncos do cover in this game, but I do think the Jets win, as it looks like the Jets, they have started to figure it out, as they've won their last 2 games after being embarrassed on Monday night in Week 1, and I think the Jets, they keep rolling. Eagles and Buccaneers. The Eagles, in my opinion, they should be 3-0 right now. And they would be 3-0 if it wasn't for some of the coaching decisions from Nick Sirianni. You can say that Saquon Barkley dropped the third down pass all you want, but they could have easily ran the ball and took out another 40 seconds on the play clock at the bare minimum, or they could have just taken a field goal early in the game instead of going for it on 4th down and not getting it. And that happened once again against the Saints last week. It happened twice. There were 4th down plays where the Eagles, they could have taken 3 points, but they decided to go for it on 4th down, and they didn't convert either one of them. And that was ultimately a bit of a difference maker in the game. Even though the Eagles, they still won the game, they could have won by a lot more than what they did. But now they go on the road to take on the Buccaneers, the team that ended their season last year in the playoffs. And just like last week, I do feel like this is a very angry Eagles team, as they know the Buccaneers were the team to end their season last year. And I do think they are out for vengeance. And the Buccaneers, they just looked really flat against the Broncos last week. I do think we'll see the Buccaneers score more points than 7 in this game, of course, but I still think the Eagles, I think they still get the job done, as Saquon Barkley has been a difference maker in the Eagles' 2 wins. And even though he did drop the third down pass a couple weeks ago, I don't put the Eagles' loss on him completely. I put it more onto Nick Sirianni. But I do think the Eagles, they do make it 2 in a row, and the Buccaneers lose 2 in a row. Commanders and Cardinals. The Commanders off of a Monday Night Football victory to remember. As Jaden Daniels, I feel like at this point, with his performance in Week 3, he put himself as the front runner for Rookie of the Year. 21 for 23, 254 passing yards, 2 touchdown passes, and 39 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. And it was a historic game against the Bengals, as that game was the first NFL game since 1940 to have no turnovers and no punting. And now the Commanders, they go on the road to take on a Cardinals team that I feel like is very underrated. And even though they did lose last week, my thoughts on the Cardinals, they have not changed. I still think the Cardinals, I do think that they are a team that you don't want to see on your schedule, because they are capable of pulling off upsets. They are capable of frustrating you. And I think that the Cardinals, I think they do bounce back in this game, as they lost 20-13 against the Lions last week in a game that did have some controversy in it. But I look forward to seeing how Jaden Daniels, how he responds to his breakout performance last week. I do think this game is a serious candidate to be the highest scoring game of the week, but I don't think it's going to be the highest scoring game of the week. I think the highest scoring game of the week is going to be Seahawks and Lions, which I will get to at the end. But I do think in an offensive showdown, I do have the Cardinals winning. I think it'll be a close game from start to finish, but I do think the Cardinals, they do get it done this week. I just feel like this being a short week for the Commanders, yes, they do have confidence, but it's a short week, and they're going on the road, which that has been a problem for so many teams in years past. Patriots and 49ers. The Patriots with a loss to the Jets on Thursday night last week, in a game where they did not look good at all, offensively especially. And the 49ers, they had the lead late against the Rams, and it looked like they were going to win. But they just let the Rams take the win away from them. And on top of all that, Brock Purdy's status for this game is unknown, as he has back soreness. Hargrave is out for the season, as that is a massive loss for the 49ers defense. And Christian McCaffrey is going to be seeing a specialist in Germany. Will George Kittle be able to come back this week? As he did not play in the game last week, but I feel like I would lean towards that maybe being precautionary. I do think it's a strong possibility George Kittle does play this week. I'll be surprised if he doesn't, honestly. But the 49ers, they just have so many injuries. But they did have this kind of situation a couple of years ago where there was so many injuries, but then they got healthier as the season went along. And I'm not counting out the 49ers just yet, but They are behind the 8 ball a little bit, but I do think the 49ers, they do take care of business in this game. Even if Brock Purdy doesn't play in this game and they have to turn to Brandon Allen, I think that this will be a low-scoring game. As I don't think the Patriots defense, they'll be able to keep the Patriots in the game for so long, as having a good defense can only take you so far, as that kind of did show this past Thursday night. I'm going to pick the 49ers to get back on the winning track. Chiefs and Chargers. Whenever we see Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert face off against each other, more often than not, it's absolute cinema. However, Justin Herbert's status for this game is unknown, as in last week's game against the Steelers, he re-aggravated his high ankle sprain. The x-rays were negative, but he will be monitored throughout the week. And also, Derwin James is suspended for this matchup. Joey Bosa, he left the game early last week. His status is up in the air, as is Joe Alt, the first-round pick from this April's NFL draft, the best offensive tackle in this draft class. And Joe Alt has been a difference maker for the Chargers so far this season. A big reason why the Chargers have been able to run the football efficiently in these first couple games of the season. His status also unknown. There's a reason why the Chiefs are favored by as much as they are, despite the Chiefs failing to cover the last 2 weeks. They're favored by a little over a touchdown right now. And that's because of the suspension of Derwin James and these injuries that are just completely unknown right now. Travis Kelce, he does have a positive history against the Chargers. He historically does really well. And I feel like if Travis Kelce does not have a good performance in this game, I do feel like it is safe to say that he's not going to have many good games this season, if any. I just think there's too many injuries on the Chargers side for this to be a close game. However, the only way that they can keep themselves in this game, in my opinion, is if they run the football early and often and efficiently and keep the Chiefs' offense on the sidelines. If they can do that, they can stay in the game. But other than that, I feel like best case scenario for this game is the Chiefs win by 2 touchdowns at least. But the worst case scenario is the Chiefs win controversially, like they have in these past couple of weeks, the past couple of seasons. Either way, I think the Chiefs win. The question is it in dominant fashion, or do they win controversially like they have in the past? Browns and Raiders, both teams with absolute letdowns last week. The Browns against the Giants and the Raiders against the Panthers. And I want to try to simplify this the best I can, because simplifying things is my typical method when picking a game like this, because both teams did not look good last week. I try to base the first thing off of who I think can bounce back the most after what happened last week, putting last week behind them. It's kind of complicated because both teams have shown they can do that. Both teams, after losing week 1, they went out and got wins in week 2 on the road. The Raiders, they had to rally in the fourth quarter to get a win, but they got the win. And the Browns, they did well defensively in the game. So then I have to go with the next thing, and that is the Browns, they at least had opportunities to win that game against the Giants. But costly mistakes is what did them in. While the Raiders, they never really had a chance in that game, as Andy Dalton had an absolute field day against the Raiders defense. And also Chuba Hubbard also had a good game as well. I am going to go with the Browns in this game. as I do feel like the Browns, at least in this situation, they at least, I think they're more likely to bounce back and put last week behind them much quicker compared to the Raiders. So I'm going to pick the Browns for that reason. And that reason alone, I do think Deshaun Watson, he will be able to bounce back, as many people are starting to question if Deshaun Watson, if he even has it anymore, but I still think he does, and I think that he'll have a decent game if, at the very least, he'll do enough to win this game, I feel like. Just like against the Jaguars in week 2. Bills and Ravens, Sunday night football, and this game should be absolute cinema. Two of the best quarterbacks going against each other. Josh Allen, who I feel like should be the front runner for league MVP at this point in the season, and Lamar Jackson, the reigning league MVP. Sunday night should be a good one. The Ravens got their first win of the season against the Cowboys on the road this past weekend. But the Ravens, they did let the Cowboys in the game at the very end, but ultimately they did get the win, and that is all that matters. While the Bills, a dominant performance against the Jaguars on Monday Night Football. The game was never even close, never competitive. It was never in any doubt. Josh Allen with a dominant performance in that game. A big reason why I feel like he is the front runner for MVP right now, as he had another big performance in week 1 against the Cardinals, where they were down 14-0 early in the game, but they ultimately rallied and came back and won. A dominant performance against the Dolphins in week 2, even though Tua did leave the game early in that game. The Bills are still up by 21 points when Tua left the game. And I am going to say that this game is going to be a 3-point victory. I do think the game is going to be close from start to finish. I feel like on paper and based off this quarterback matchup, it should be one of the best games of the season so far, maybe even the best game so far of the year. And I am going to go with the Bills in this game. In a game that feels like a coin flip to me. The Ravens, they are slightly favored right now. They're favored by a couple of points. Something does tell me that a lot of the public, they may back the Bills in this game, which that does worry me a little bit. Because if I had to anticipate, I do think the majority of the public will be on the Bills side in this one. Because they feel, okay, the Bills are 3-0, so they must be the better team. That doesn't necessarily mean that. This is a home game for the Ravens, and the home team, they do always get a couple of points in their favor. But I just think in this coin flip game, I am going to go with the Bills. Despite this being a short week for the Bills, they did have the game. They had the game won early, so they did get to rest all of their starters in that game. While the Ravens, the Cowboys, they did get themselves back in the game at the very end, but ultimately they still got the win. It doesn't matter. All that matters is they got the win. But I think the Bills win a very close game, what I think will be a thrilling finish. Once again, we have 2 Monday Night Football games this week. The first of the 2 games, the Titans and Dolphins. We saw this matchup on Monday Night Football last season, where the Dolphins, they had the lead late, but the Titans, they rallied back and they took the win away from the Dolphins. But now this season's matchup, it is a lot different. The Titans, they do not have Derrick Henry. And also the Dolphins, Tua is still on the IR, recovering from his 4th concussion in less than 2 seasons. And it's unknown who the Dolphins will be starting at quarterback on Monday night. Skylar Thompson is questionable, But the Dolphins, they're exploring all other options at quarterback for this game on Monday night. Could it be Tyler Huntley? Could it be somebody that they're going to sign today or tomorrow and then try to rush him and learn the Dolphins playbook for this Monday night game? This is a game where I just feel like I have to pick somebody to win, and I don't want to, but that's part of the deal when you're making NFL predictions, is you pick every single game. The Titans aren't as bad as their 0-3 record shows. The Titans defense is the main reason why the Titans, they've even been in games in the first place. And the Titans are 0-3, a big reason why they are, is because of Will Levis turnovers. Will Levis had 2 more turnovers this past Sunday against the Packers. And I'm going to go with a low-scoring game in this one, as I do feel like both defenses will hold their own in this game for most of the way. I feel like it's just going to be which quarterback is going to make plays that they haven't been able to make so far. Whether if Will Levis, if he is able to not turn the ball over in this game, or if Skylar Thompson does start, if Skylar Thompson will take advantage of having the playmakers in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and even Devon Achane. I am going to pick the Dolphins in a low-scoring game, in a game that I don't want to pick, because I feel like no matter which way I go for this game, I'm going to be wrong. But that is part of the deal when you make NFL predictions. The second of 2 Monday Night Football games this week, Seahawks and Lions. All eyes are going to be on this one, and I can't wait to see this game go down. Last season, we saw these two teams face off against each other in Week 2. It was a high-scoring game. The Seahawks won in overtime by a score of 37-31, and it ended up being one of the best games of the regular season. And I am expecting another high-scoring game in this game as well. This is going to be the first big test for the Seahawks this season. I can understand if you feel that going on the road against the Patriots was a big test for the Seahawks, given that the Patriots are a team where if the Patriots do win, it's mainly because of their defense, allowing their offense to have a lot of opportunities to score and setting up their offense in good field position. And they did win against the Patriots in overtime a couple weeks ago, but this is their first massive test of the year, as the Seahawks, they are one of the remaining undefeated teams in the NFL, and they're going on the road against a Lions team where the fans are going to be absolutely amped and energized after last season's run to the NFC Championship game. And if a couple of things went differently in the NFC Championship game, the Lions, they would have gone to the Super Bowl. But I did talk about earlier in the season about how the Lions handle that, because the Lions, they've been able to fly under the radar the last couple of seasons, but now people this season are expecting them to be great. And how does a team like the Lions handle that? As we've seen in years past, no matter what sport it is, when we see a team that flies under the radar and they have a outlier season, they have a season that nobody expects them to have, how do they respond the next season? Because now, when they have a strong season, the next year, everybody expects them to be good. I do think the Lions, they are going to have a good season. But I do think this game will be a lot like last year's game. And it's going to come down to which team has the ball last in this game, I feel like. And I do think that does happen to the Seahawks. I do think in a high-scoring game, the Seahawks, they pull off the upset and move to 4-0 on the year. And that will do it for my Week 4 NFL predictions. Comment your predictions down below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, enjoy the games this week. I may do some things on YouTube Shorts this week. Be on the lookout for anything on YouTube Shorts that I create, which I will do the NFL Week 3 takeaways either tomorrow or Thursday, leading up to the Thursday night game between the Cowboys and Giants. But until next time, have a good one.